him put some railing around his pool. And I have a vested interest because I want my grandbabies to be safe as they do. So we've been doing that this week and had a good time doing that. When I asked Kristen what song I had sung here before, she couldn't remember. And I couldn't remember. So I'm going to risk being redundant. If she couldn't remember, maybe you won't remember either. But so I thought I would sing this. Is this mic working? Am I good on this mic here? Can you hear me? Can you give me a little more volume on this? Testing. Okay. In Sabbath school today, we got talking about witnessing, at least in the sanctuary class, and I thought I would share with you. I asked them if I should share this experience with the whole church, and they said yes. So I don't want to risk running into your time. But a week ago, I had an amazing experience. I had become friends with a man by the name of Randy, and he had been in prison. He had done some time. His crime was so bad and detestable to the inmates that he was afraid for his life. He was in there 5.5 years, and he told me that someone cooked up a story as to the wrong reason that he was in prison. They I think, attempted murder. And one inmate dug up the real truth as to why Randy was in prison. And he said when he told me, every hair stood up on my body. I was so afraid for my life. And he asked that inmate, why didn't you tell on me? Why didn't you spread the story around the prison? And he said, one reason. I'm in here because I'm falsely accused. And everybody deserves a second chance. Randy promised the Lord that he would read his Bible every day and he would turn his life over to Jesus if his life was spared. Now that he's out of prison, 4 years ago, the conference evangelist, Justice St. Hilaire, baptized him. And he is such a vibrant Christian. And he will go to great lengths to win a soul to Christ. I want to give you an example. He knew Pat Powers 20 of the 35 years that she lived in my town of Abbotsford. And he was so desperate to get her to attend the meetings of the evangelist. He'd invited her many, many times. She wouldn't come. She did attend his ordination as a deacon, but he could never get it. Until a year later, Justice was coming for another series of meetings. And on the 5th night, he pulled out all stops and he says, you've got to come to hear. I'm told this is one of the most important sermons we'll ever hear in our life. You've got to come. She agreed to come. When she was there, she got goosebumps and she accused the devil. She said, you have duped me all these years. She'd been a religious person until 18 years of age and then never darkened the door of a church after that. And she said, I'll come every night, but I don't have a car. He dedicated his wheels without counting the cost. Now ask yourself if you would do this. He drove from his town in Surrey way into Abbotsford to get her, half an hour, then back to Surrey to pick up 2 more people, way over to Richmond near the airport, and then after the meeting, the reverse of that. That was 300 kilometers a night. For the rest of the series of meetings, over 6,000 kilometers he put in his car to see that Pat got to the meetings. Not surprising then that she made her decision to be baptized. I thought, if Randy could do that, what am I willing to do? What are you willing to do? What is a soul worth? What are we willing to give? So anyway, let's share this piece of music. My phone shut off. I have the words in here and I'll need those. So let me get back to that. And we'll see if the track works. I'm down in front of here where I can hear the track a little better. I'm deaf in one ear, and I can't hear out of the other one. We need wisdom, we need power, and true love for each other. We have had so many big but empty words. So we come before your face, asking for your grace. Bring your people to a state of kingdom life. Restore your church again. Touch your people once again. With your precious holy hand, we pray. Let your kingdom shine upon this earth through a living, glorious church, not for temporary deeds, but in glory. Touch your people once again. Lord, you see your tired servants and your broken, wounded soldiers. Oh, how much we need your precious healing hand. We need the power of the cross as the only source for us. When we stand up facing final battle cry, restore your church again. Touch your people once again. With your precious holy hand, we pray. Let your kingdom shine upon this earth through a living, glorious church, not for temporary deeds, but to restore authority and power. The mighty rushing wind blows. Touch your people once again. Let the mighty rushing wind blow. Touch your people once
Thank you, brother. Okay. Our scripture this morning is from Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Hebrews 12, 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And we'll turn the time over to Kelly.
Good morning. I want to say 3 thank yous this morning. Thank you for Mike for inviting me. Thank you for Walter up there. Walter. Thank you, Walter. you should very much appreciate having a church that has somebody that understands the sound system and tech stuff, because in our church there was a time when nobody did, and so I understand that. And the third thing that I want to thank is for a wonderful testimony and a wonderful song. That happened to be one of my wife's favorite songs. So there's a lot of things to be thankful for this morning. And about going into my time, don't worry. I have all afternoon. They're laughing now. Let's see. Okay. Let's bow our heads for an added word of prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you again for bringing us all here. You brought us all here for a reason. You had it planned out ahead, and we're just thankful for that. I just ask for the Holy Spirit as I'm speaking. Please lead in each of our hearts. In your name, amen. Okay. You might be wondering why it says Lessons from the PCT Part 2. You might be saying, where's Part 1? And I'm going to do something this morning that I've never done before. I'm going to give you 2 sermons for the price of 1. So that's why you were laughing when I said I had all afternoon. But anyway. No, the first sermon I did a while ago at Abundant Life Church. And anyway, I'm going to try to get through that sermon in 5 minutes. So just so you're up to speed on Part 2. The first sermon was about Anthony and I. We decided to hike a section of the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail. We were going to hike from Stevens Pass to Snoqualmie Pass. It's 74 miles. We're going to do it in 8 days. And we started out, and because of a storm, we didn't make it. This was August. And because of that storm, we didn't make it. But I learned a lot of lessons, spiritual lessons from that. And so I'm going to go through some of those lessons that I learned on the first trip. So this was 2 summers ago. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see. Maybe not. I'm trying to figure this out here. Okay.
You have to aim it this way.
Yeah. Let's see. You know, that would help. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Walter. Okay. Important lesson number 1. Christianity is not about theory, but it's about an experience. James 1:22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. You know, we can read about spiritual things. We can talk about spiritual things. But if that's all we do, we are what I would call an armchair Christian. And we're deceiving ourselves. Because true Christianity is about an experience. Think of things like faith. Is faith a theory, or is faith an experience? It's an experience. What about loving your neighbor? Wouldn't it be nice if loving your neighbor was all about theory? But it's not about theory. It's about an experience. I just had to throw this picture up here. This is 2 summers ago. This is less than 2 years ago. This is my son Anthony. He's right down here. And I won't have you stand up. And anyway, just for you parents, for how quickly kids grow up. Anyway, we started out hiking, and nice weather. But after the first day, we had hiked 12 miles, and I was totally exhausted. We set up camp, I made supper, and I had no appetite. And the reason was because I was more tired than hungry. I don't know if you've ever done that, but all I wanted to do was get in the tent. Even though I should be eating, I was too tired to be hungry. So my question is, do the cares of this life, some of them because of our choices, others maybe not, do they leave you more tired than hungry? And when I say hungry, I mean hungry for the bread of life. I hope not. So that was another lesson that I learned. John 6:35, and Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. Some of the pretty scenery along the way. That's me being very tired. We eventually got to a place where there was a stream. And I had planned this whole trip around this particular stream because it was known for being hard to cross, especially when the water was high. And so I was worrying about this for months. When we got there, it wasn't that bad. We just went across. Lesson number 3. In your Christian walk, worrying about troubles doesn't get you over them. Do we take these texts? We know these texts. Do we take them for granted? Do we think about them? For he himself has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Do we take those to heart? Or do we worry about things? We should leave worry behind and press forward. This is some of the trail. Some of the trail was pretty good, but some of it wasn't that good. Important lesson number 4. The Christian path might be a narrow path, but it's a good path. The Pacific Crest Trail is 2,660 miles long, and it's 2 feet wide. Why don't you think people, instead of going straight to the lake, they take the path? Because the path is the best way to get there. You could go straight. You'd crawl over boulders and through brambles and get scratched and beat up. But if you stay on the path, even though it's a restrictive path, it's a good path. The Christian path is narrow at times, but it's the best path to get you where you want to go. Enter by the narrow gate, for the wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. This was coming down into Waptis Lake. It's about halfway on what we anticipated to hike. And about an hour after this picture, it started raining. And about an hour after that, it was pouring rain, and it started to hail. The water was 6 inches deep in the trail. The hail was marble size, and it did that for 16 hours. Oops, sorry. The goal of the Christian life is not a destination, it's a reunion. You know, when we hiked out because of the storm, we didn't get to our destination. But Ella was there at the trailhead, my wife, and it was a good reunion. You know, when we think about heaven, do we think about mansions? You know, there are mansions here. Rich people have mansions. Our goal is not things, but the person who saved us. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. That's the point of the text, is that where I am, there you may be also. Our goal is a reunion. Okay, it took a little bit longer than 5 minutes. Anyway, now for the real sermon today. Anthony and I last summer decided to continue our hike, or make a connection with that hike. We decided to hike 75 miles of the PCT from 30 miles south of Snoqualmie Pass to Coma Pass. It's a little dirt road across the trail, to Waptis Lake, to join up with where we had stopped the previous year. So, if I can do this here, I don't know if you can see this, but our plan was to hike, this is the whole PCT, and our plan was to hike from about there to about there. Okay. Okay. I can't even do this as small of a section that is. But so 75 miles doesn't look like very much, but it feels like a lot when you're hiking it. So, oh, there we go. Well, anyway, okay. This is Anthony and I packing food. And no, we didn't live on Rice Krispie treats, Pop-Tarts, and pretzels. We didn't live on that. These are just the snacks. So anyway, that's us packing. And then on August 9, Anthony and I started out. And our goal was Snoqualmie Pass in 2 days. So that was 2 15-mile days. And the question was, could we do it? We started out, and beautiful, there's Rainier. It was a beautiful day, and the hiking was good. And you see these all along the way. I like this sign. This is for PCT hikers. These are for through hikers. This is a trail magic. That's what they call it. It's when somebody does something kind for people that are hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. And so this person, it was a dry year, so they hauled water and in jugs and set it beside the trail so that hikers would have water. So it's me resting here. And then we made it to camp about 4 o'clock. And both Anthony and I felt great. We had hiked 15 miles and we felt really good. Now, if you remember what I said about the first year we hiked, after 12 miles, I was exhausted. So, what made the difference? And I'll give you 2 reasons. The first one actually started 8 months before this. And Steve knows a little bit about this. My son, along with his daughters, and Angela's daughters, wanted to do a triathlon. And so my son wanted to be a part of that. And like most fathers, it's like a whirlpool. You know, when you're on the outside, you don't think you're involved at all. You're just going around slowly. And then slowly you get to the middle and then you're spinning around. And that's the way I was, because I was thinking, I can't send my 12-year-old son by himself to the gym. So I had to join him. And I thought, well, maybe I'll lose some weight, get into shape or something like that. Well, it ended up being a lot more than that. Steve was there for some of Dave's workouts, and Dave was the coach. Dave had hundreds of ways of making my lungs and muscles burn. He was very good at that. There were some times when I thought that I wasn't actually getting stronger, I was just getting used to pain. I considered it progress after the first few days when I didn't feel like throwing up afterwards because he was working us so hard. It was an hour a day, 3 times a week for 5 months. And so was it always fun? Well, I would say most of the time it was fun, not all the time. How about, did it make a difference? You bet it made a difference. Because the first day last summer when Anthony and I were hiking, we felt great. Much better. Matter of fact, the whole trip, even though we had much harder days than the previous year, I was never tired like I was the previous year. So what did I learn from that? Oh, this is me talking with my wife, texting. Anyway, lesson 6. You don't exercise for today, you exercise today for tomorrow. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty, thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. Probably most of us read our Bibles, we have devotions, we pray, we witness to other people, we come to prayer nights. I'm sure everybody appreciates the people that come to prayer night, people coming there. When we do these things, we're exercising. Now, are these things good in the moment? I think so. I mean, I'm blessed by those things in the moment. I kind of like to think of them as tools that you can use that day. You know, you read something in the Bible, it's a tool that you can use that day. But sometimes, do you find that the tools that you've gotten that day, you don't have a job for that day? The things that you have don't seem to fit with what's going on. Matter of fact, sometimes do you feel like you're just going through the motions? But all of these spiritual exercises that you do will pay off in the future. When you're reading the Bible and when you're praying, you're building your knowledge and your relationship with God. You might not use it that day. You might not use it that week or month or year. But there will come a day when it will pay off. Maybe you're going through trials or discouragement. It's those times that these things that we've been doing can give us strength. Sometimes exercise, spiritual exercise, done today is for tomorrow. So the next day we headed out, and it was perfect weather, and before we knew it, we were walking down into Snoqualmie Pass. What do you think the first thing we did was? We ate. We went to the restaurant there and we ate a big meal. And what do you think the second thing we did was? We ate again. Right by the gas station, I don't know why we did it, but by the gas station there's a little trailer. It's called the Aardvark. And they serve good food there, actually. You ought to try it. So we ate again. And then we went to the gas station and we picked up our box of food. See, we weren't dumb. We thought, why carry the food the whole way when Ella could leave a box at Snoqualmie Pass of food for the rest of the trip? So that's what we did. The next morning, we ate at the restaurant again. And then, who should show up but my crazy wife? She even phoned me on the cell phone going, "Oh, so what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm eating in a restaurant." And she comes walking in the restaurant. Anyway, that was a good surprise. So then the next day we're off again, north of Snoqualmie Pass. And this is going to be a big climb. It's about 3,000 feet up, but very beautiful. Now, how many of you have been to this place? Yeah, I knew. I know there's at least 3 of you, and anyway, it's a beautiful place. It's a very unusual place along the Pacific Crest Trail. It's called the Kindle Catwalk, and I think some of you may even know people that worked on that trail building it. Here's my son there, but you can see how it goes along the side of that rock face. But it's a beautiful area. And finally, after hiking some more, we arrived at Ridge Lake, about 1 o'clock. So we had lots of time. What are we going to do with this time? So we swam in the lake and set up camp, I think, 8 again. There's our food. It really is better tasting than it looks there. This was our camp. I told you there was 2 reasons that we were feeling so much better this year than last year. And this is the second reason. On the first trip, when I started out, I was carrying 45 pounds. This trip, my pack was never heavier than 25 pounds. So you think that makes a difference? Yeah, it makes a lot of difference. So what did I do differently? Well, one thing was, instead of my 5.5 pound tent, my son and I just used this tarp that weighed 12 ounces. And it even rained on us, and we were perfectly fine underneath the tarp. There was no bugs. It was August. But mostly, we just didn't take things that we didn't need. That was the difference. Whether it was food or clothing, we just didn't take things that we didn't need. And I wanted to show you another picture here. This was our neighbors. And I'm not trying to talk badly about them, but this was our neighbors. This was a father and son. The son was 15, a little bit bigger than Anthony is right now. Their goal was to hike from Snoqualmie Pass to Stevens Pass. The son was carrying 65 pounds. So that boy was carrying more weight than Anthony and I's packs combined. You can see they have a big pot there. They had 2 tents, two-person tents, because the son didn't want to be next to his dad snoring. Anyway, yeah, you can see a nice big pot there and lots of stuff, just lots and lots of stuff. They were going the next day to hike 11 miles to where we were going to camp the next day. We never saw them. They never made it. So why didn't they make it? Because they had too much stuff. But even if you are strong enough to carry such a pack, do you really want to be miserable the whole way? Do you want every step to be a burden and be difficult? So what's the lesson here? Important lesson number 7. What you don't need can hurt you. Hebrews 12:1, our text for today. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which is so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. In life there are burdens. Now, some things you have to carry. Life has burdens. It has joys and responsibilities, but it also has burdens. It might have hardships that maybe through no fault of your own, you have to bear. It may be difficult sometimes. Maybe you lose a job. I know a little bit about that. But just like on my hike, there are some things you have to carry, but some things you don't have to carry. Are you carrying around resentments, jealousies, hurt feelings, anger, bad habits? These are things you don't have to carry. Do you have the weight of not forgiving someone. That can be a heavy one, and you don't have to carry that one. Oh, and this one's a hard one. Is your life so busy that it's a burden that takes you away from time with God? Are you telling everyone, I'm so busy? Are you telling that to God also? Just like on my hike, sometimes if you carry too much weight, it can actually keep you from getting to your destination. Do you want that? But also, even if you can bear it, do you want your journey to be enjoyable and not a misery? So I say lighten your load. Some things you can take off yourself, and some things maybe you'll have to have God do that for you. But remember, what you don't need can hurt you. So the next day, we're heading off. I keep on doing that. Let's see here. There we go. He was cute, so I took a picture. Beautiful views. This section of the Pacific Crest Trail is absolutely beautiful. It's about 10 miles, 11 miles long, but it's beautiful. Big views. There's Anthony. That's me. Just some of the beautiful pictures along the way. We did see a bear along the way. He was probably about 50 yards from us. He didn't care about us at all. He loved his berries. And so we sat and watched him for a while. I even texted my wife, hey, I'm watching a bear right now. And I don't know that comforted her so much, but anyway. So after a little while, we kept on, and then we saw a lake, and we looked down at it, and there's another bear in the lake. So he's swimming around, and then he gets out of the lake and starts running because there was another bear. So I thought 3 bears in 1 hour. Wow, that's pretty good. Anyway, we kept hiking, and we eventually got to this place. And it's 4 miles long that pack trains can't cross each other because it's so rugged. It's very rocky. And so it's quite hard on your feet. Anyway, I mean, how can you build a trail on that? You know, the trail is constantly, sloughing off there. That's what you're walking on. Anyway, so we keep hiking, and eventually we get to Parks Lakes, and I get to soak my feet, which was nice. And a couple miles more, we were looking down at our destination. How many of you have been to this lake or seen this lake? It's a beautiful lake, beautiful lake. It's called Spectacle Lake. I think it's one of the most beautiful lakes in the Cascades. And we set up camp, and I have supper again. And no supper's complete without butterscotch pudding. Anyway, so it was just a beautiful spot. I wanted to ask you a question. What does the number 2420 mean to you? Probably nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But last year, I noticed when we were hiking south from Snoqualmie Pass, we'd pass through hikers going north. And I knew that they had passed by that lake. I knew that they had either camped there or walked by it. And so I would ask them, I'd say, oh, did you stay at Spectacle? Didn't you think Spectacle was a pretty lake? And they would say, I don't know. And I'd say, I mean, you had to walk by it. It's this big, beautiful lake, with big towering mountains behind it. You had to have been there. And they're like, I just don't remember. I don't remember. And so finally, I would get out, it's called half-mile maps. They're maps specific for hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. And I'd get out my map and I'd say, it was mile 2420. And they would say, oh yeah, 2420, yeah, I remember there. Yeah, that was a nice place. And I thought, what in the world? And I thought, that was interesting that that they knew it by the mileage. They knew where they were by the mileage. Now, sometimes people, they kind of get down on through hikers because they say, oh, they don't stop and enjoy the views. They don't stop and enjoy things. They just keep moving. And like, for instance, this lake, here's this beautiful lake, and they just walk right by it. But I have to cut them some slack, because by the time they've reached here, 2,420 miles, by the time they've reached here, they've hiked by 1,000 lakes. Okay, they've hiked by 1,000 lakes. Can you think of 1,000 of anything? Can you remember 1,000 of anything? I mean, 1,000 things that you did last week? You can't do it. And they probably hiked by a lot of lakes that were beautiful, and probably a lot of lakes that were more beautiful than this one. So I kind of cut them some slack. But the interesting thing to me was that they knew where they were in relationship to where they're going. Now, down at Mexico, the half-mile map said mile 0. And they knew that when they got to the Canadian border, it would say 2660. So, when they were at this lake, they were at 2420. They knew they had 240 miles to go. Now, why don't you think through hikers stop and linger at every beautiful place? Because if they did, they'd never make it to Canada. Especially before the snow comes, and it would end their trip. So what does that mean for us? Enjoy the here, but don't forget your destination. I love this verse. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It's in Hebrews. It's talking about people of faith in the Bible. And these all died in faith, not having received the promises. Like Moses, Abraham, he had lots of promises. He never saw those promises fulfilled. But they have seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. We talked about carrying burdens, and that life is hard sometimes. I think there's a lot of people that look forward to the day when every tear will be wiped away. But there are a lot of good things too. We wake up in the morning with a lot of good things in our lives. There's a lot of beauty. And I think God wants us to enjoy those things. But do we remind ourselves of where we are in relationship to where we're going? Or do these beauties make us want to linger? The thru hiker has a daily reminder of how far he's come and where he's going. Do we remind ourselves of that every day? We don't want to linger too long, or we might not get to where we want to go. Enjoy the here, but don't forget your destination. So, Anthony and I were off again. This was going to be a big day. It was going to be 18 miles. It was about 4,000 feet up and about 5,300 feet down. So it's going to be a long day. And this is on the way up. And this is Anthony and I at the top. So it was all downhill from here. We stopped at some lakes. And here we're looking down at Waptis Lake, about 3,000 feet below us. We hiked down, and we arrived at a trail junction at about 6 in the evening. And there was a couple that was standing at the junction, and their trail names were Chia and Late Start. Okay. That's Chia on the left, that's Late Start on the right. That's their trail names. And I just wanted to say how God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes people say things like that are chance. I don't think so. They had started their hike at the border of California and Oregon. So they weren't technically a through hiker, but they had hiked 800 miles to get to where we saw them. So they had started months before. The interesting thing is when we Anthony and I ate that second meal at Snoqualmie Pass, they happened to be at the aardvark there. They were at another table. I don't think we said anything more than hello to them. But you wonder why Anthony and I needed to eat another meal. But they recognized us. Now, see, they hadn't hiked the PCT north like we had. When we had hiked 35 miles north, they had taken another trail and gone by some hot springs. And at 6 o'clock, as they're hiking to this junction, and Anthony and I are getting to that junction, we meet exactly. I'm not exaggerating here. If it had been a minute later, we would have never talked to them. So Late Start, he says, "Oh, I saw you at the aardvark." I said, "Yeah." And we both needed some water, so we went down to the creek, got some water. We're talking there. It was kind of late, so we ended up camping together. And in talking with them, because of the fires, they were going to have to bypass north of Stevens Pass. They couldn't hike north of Stevens Pass last year. So they had to get to Stehekin. And they knew that we were from around this area, so how do you do that? And I said, well, you go through Wenatchee. And if you go through Wenatchee, you might as well stay with us. So that's what they did. They ended up staying with us for 5 days. Here's them in our living room playing. They're very musical, so it was a lot of fun. We played games. We went for walks. They happened to be mostly vegan, so it was fun to share recipes and do things like that. We talked to them about spiritual things, and they talked to us about what was important in their lives. When we took them to Chelan, to go up to Stehekin on that Friday, there were tears in her eyes because we enjoyed their company so much. And luckily it wasn't the end because we ended up spending a couple days with them when we traveled down to California at Christmas time. So we Skype with them every once in a while and everything. I would say they're very special to our family. So what's the lesson? Pay attention to the intersections in the road. When I think of in the Bible chance encounters, I think of Philip. This story, you know this story, but let's think about it. And behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians, who had charge of all of her treasury and had come to Jerusalem to worship, was returning and sitting in his chariot. Just imagine the scene here. He was reading Isaiah the prophet. Then the Spirit said to Philip, go near and overtake this chariot. How much time did Philip have to make that decision? It could have been seconds, right? That's not a lingering type moment. That's like, God says do it, he did it. Philip came near, and that part of the world was changed. There's Ethiopia, there's parts of Ethiopia, and people there that are Christian, and they attribute it to Philip. How many intersections do you have in the average day? My guess is a lot. God is calling you, like he called Philip, to come close to someone. Now, I know people that have told me they would never invite total strangers into their home for 5 days. And I would agree that there's a risk to that. But I'd also say there's a risk in not heeding God's voice. And there can be great rewards to that. You know, our family is grateful that God arranged 4 people to meet on a little trail in the woods. So Anthony and I kept going. So we got to Waptus, and the next morning we parted ways with Chia and Late Start, and all I had to do was get to the trailhead now. And you can see I was hiking fast to get there. So finally, we got to the trailhead.
Hey, where'd you get those?
As a pass.
Oh, sorry for the graphic nature of that. You know, I talked about the goal of the Christian is a destination. It's not a destination, but a reunion. But I wanted to add something to that. Yeah, I can do that. Okay. Our reunion will be a personal one. You know, there will come a day when Jesus is standing in front of thousands and 10,000s and welcoming them into the kingdom. But he's also the person that will put his arm around you and say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." He will look into your eyes and you will see him face to face. 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I am also known. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that day? That will be a great day. So I think we have a closing hymn. 206.